and when I read this, I had to laugh, that we had one peak refuel per person, which allowed me to realize that I don't fantasize about Taco John's and Pizza Hut when I'm actually full. So it's pretty amazing, all of my life backpacking, when I eat my meal and then I still am thinking about all the other things I could eat. It's probably because I didn't eat enough.
Hi, I'm Carrie.
And I'm Molly.
And you're listening to the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
We're going to talk about day 6 in the winds. So this was our second to last day. You'll remember we had that crazy, huge thunderstorm the night before. It really was probably like the biggest thunderstorm that we've ever slept outside during. And I remember it was kind of fun, but we also had these moments of like, wow, like, what would this be like if we were camping even higher? So we were kind of grateful that we'd picked the space that we'd chosen to camp at. We were so nicely sheltered with all these trees around us. We hadn't gotten yet to that theory of maybe that causes trees to drip on you more, but it wasn't really that much of a rainstorm as it was a hailstorm and a thunderstorm.
And it's funny to me because the tree that we had covering our tent was kind of this scraggly looking tree. So it definitely still let a number of hailstones through, but we were thankful for that one little scraggly tree. And we've read stories about people who have hiked and backpacked in the winds, talking about having to endure really intense thunderstorms in super open terrain, and how the wind just goes against your tent and you wonder if your tent will actually still remain standing or if it's going to just like break from the amount of wind. So we were thankful because we had a lot of thunder, lightning, and hail, but I don't know if we actually had too many wind gusts, or we were just in a really nice protected spot. So patting ourselves on the back for not camping up a little bit higher as we had considered doing earlier in the day.
And I actually did read a story one time about someone who was camping higher up and they had a freestanding tent, right? So one that you don't have to stake, and I believe it was actually a trekking pole tent as well, and it actually like got ripped or their trekking pole broke. I don't remember what happened, but a lot of people say you shouldn't use a solely freestanding tent in the winds, especially if you're hiking at higher elevations. But then the difficult part with that is a lot of the times when you're hiking at the higher elevations, it's all granite, so it's impossible to stake. So there's kind of a lot of different things that go into the calculation for what tent you should bring. But thankfully, our Nemo has just been trusty for us for many years. But it was kind of nice because in the morning when we woke up, our tent was completely dry. It really didn't rain in my memory that long throughout the night. I mean, it, thundered, lightning for a couple hours, I'd say. But I don't think it really rained all night long. So we were pretty psyched to actually wake up to a dry campsite. We just kind of did our morning routine, enjoyed ourselves. And one thing that was a little bit funny is I had dug my cat hole the night before, and in the morning I'm using it. And of course it's like a good distance from our trail. It's obviously very far away from the lake. And I'm like, wow, what a perfect place for a cat hole. Well, of course, there was a second trail behind where a cat hole was. And so, of course, there were like people coming by. And I don't think they could see me from where they were. I tried to just stay really still, but it's one of those funny things where it's like, I wish I would have known about the other trail before I made this cat hole.
Right? Like you're going to have to just start walking 200 feet in all directions from your cat hole to see if there are any other random user-made trails that pop up. And how is a girl to know? But that was a little bit unnerving to then have to make sure you're playing a little hide and go seek where there is no seeking or finding, just the hiding portion.
And so when we got everything all packed up and ready to go that morning, I feel like we were kind of off on like where we had pitched our tent was kind of like a user-made trail. So we knew we had to go to a different trail to even start, our day. And we kind of had to end up just going cross country. But it was nice because at this point we were feeling more comfortable in the winds, a little bit more familiar with the winds. And so it was kind of like, okay, fun. Like maybe we'll get to see what it feels like to have to go cross country till you reach kind of a general landmark area, and then hopefully we'll find the trail over there. And so we did. It's not the same as a forest in the North Cascades, where you'd be walking through. I mean, half the time off trail in the North Cascades or in the Cascades is like just bushwhacking and shrubs that are as tall as you. But the area that we were in was kind of a lot more pleasant than that, I'd say. So Yeah.
It was mainly, it was forested, but there wasn't really too much other like bushes or anything we had to navigate through. So we could just kind of like point ourselves straight up the hill and figure that we were going to intersect the trail at some point. And indeed, that's what we did. So we set off onto the basically ascending towards Texas Pass, which was going to be, I think, our high point of the entire trip. It's pretty steep, and when you're hiking through the winds and you can see different passes from far away, they all just look like totally vertical. It's like ridiculous. So I was kind of curious how it might go going up something steep like Texas Pass this day.
And before we got to Texas Pass, we passed by Billy Lake, which was where we'd kind of thought about camping the night before. And we were so glad that we didn't camp there because it was just basically sandy and exposed. But it also was such a stunning view that I think if for some reason I knew for a fact there'd be no thunderstorm in the winds, which how is that even possible? I would probably definitely consider camping there. And in my delusional mind that morning, I thought maybe we'll go for a swim when we get to Billy Lake because it's kind of a warm, sunny day. But of course, when we got there, the wind was just blasting because this is the winds, you guys. And so we quickly decided that that was not even an option on the table.
And especially thinking back to our time on the Timberline Trail when we had pitched our tent in that volcanic sandy soil, and then our tent had literally started to blow away on us, and we had to like catch it and prevent that from happening and then hike to an area where it was more sheltered. I think that we think twice anytime there's a sandy area. Like there was a sandy lake in the winds 2 days prior. We'd thought about pitching our tent there and then decided against it because we didn't know what the weather was going to do. And same thing at this lake. But it sure did make for beautiful scenery, and it would have been an absolutely epic swimming lake. I think that the lakes with sand on the sides versus rock and kind of, weird like mossy things are so fun to swim in. So if it was not so windy or maybe a little bit warmer, I think you would have found us in that lake. This was another one of those approaches in the winds that I just anticipated was going to be so steep from the get-go. But from our departure from our campsite up to basically the base of Texas Pass, we actually only gained about 500 feet over 2 miles. So it was a very pleasant walk. And there was a few lakes that we could enjoy. And I mean, it was windy, but it was like this sunny, totally cloudless sky, which we really hadn't had a cloudless day since we entered the winds. We'd really been dealing with a lot of rain and thunderstorms, which we still had patches of, sunshine, but we didn't have one of those just totally clear bluebird days. And this was what this day was. One of the things that really struck me is as we were rounding the corner, kind of working towards Texas Pass, is the lake to our left side. The sun was just reflecting off of it so strongly, and then the wind that was blowing was causing the water to just sparkle, essentially. So every body of water that was there was just sparkling. It kind of reminds me of the Palisade Lakes on the John Muir Trail. That's what it looked like, and it was just a stunning view to see as we headed towards Texas Pass.
When we reached Texas Pass, it's starting to get to be kind of those big boulders, and you think, okay, well, how's this going to go? But it's funny because sometimes the trail just really reveals itself as you get closer, and it's kind of like, okay.
Well, and as we were getting to the point, we kind of rounded the corner and we could see Texas Pass. It looked so intense. Like, it looked like it just went straight up. There was no discernible path that you could see at the time, and there were people hiking it, but I feel like you couldn't really see those people from the distance we were at, and I started to actually get a little bit afraid. Like, I was legitimately scared, and I think I told Carrie, like, oh my gosh, like, do we think, like, can we even do this pass? And like Carrie said, the closer we got, it is true. Once you get to the base of it, instead of the intimidation that you felt when you were a little further away and you can't even imagine what your route might be, there was plenty of kind of user-made paths, just like Asgard Pass in the enchantments in Washington. Once you get close to it, there's like several different options you could take to go up, or just you could crawl over boulders until you make it and make your own path. But yeah, it was true. The path kind of revealed itself, and we just kept picking our way up, and it felt like we were making great time without trying to go fast. We just kept climbing and ascending, and when you'd stop to take a break, all of a sudden the lake that we were walking by down below was very far away. And it was actually enjoyable. I'm looking in my journal right now. And I said that we just felt so strong. And to go from feeling scared and intimidated to maybe an hour later being in the midst of going up a steep pass, but feeling really good, especially after 6 days of backpacking and being at altitude, was just a very exhilarating feeling. And so Texas Pass, the way that we took it, we were on the north side going southbound. We ascended about 600 feet in a third of a mile. And it definitely was work, but it was one of my favorite parts of the trip, actually. It was so fun.
Yeah, it really didn't feel too bad. And one part that was a little bit funny is there were some people, as we were going up to Billy Lake, that were just hiking super fast, and we let them pass us. It was clear they were in a big hurry. And then it was kind of funny because when we got to Texas Pass, I feel like they just, I don't know if they were taking a break or something, but they ended up way behind us. And I never really expected that because I just kind of thought, okay, Texas Pass, going to be a big deal, going to be slow, going to be hard. But I think sometimes when you're just chipping away at something, it's kind of, and instead of like looking at the whole picture, it just kind of becomes much more doable. So after we got to the top of Texas Pass, we really enjoyed the views, first of all, that were behind us, but then the views in front of us were absolutely stunning. We were finally reaching the Cirque of the Towers. So you've got Pingora Peak, which is a very popular climbing destination, and just all the rugged peaks around it they're just so beautiful. And of course then you have Lonesome Lake that's just sparkling down at the bottom. There's like a little river or creek that's kind of running down there, and there were these wildflowers, and it was just like such a wonderful view. At the top we met this group of people that were hiking, and we kind of visited with them for a while. But we just really took a little bit of time to take it in because, again, we weren't going that far today. I mean, 5 miles, I think, was our plan for the day. And so it really was just so fun to get to the top and enjoy all those views.
And me feeling just so strong from our trip up Texas Pass was looking on either side of the pass because there's 2 peaks on either side. And I was trying to determine if Carrie and I should try to scramble up to one, and then we could have like a air quotes summit in the winds. And I was like, Carrie, we have time, like we don't have to go very far, should we try it? I feel so strong and it's not that far away. And then we did kind of sit down and think about it, and it's one of those things where something can look so close but when it's another maybe 600 or 800 feet higher than you, it always adds up and it takes time. So we decided that what we'd really like to do is try to get down so we could actually get a good quality swim in the winds is it Shadow Lake, Carrie? Lonesome Lake, sorry about that. Lonesome Lake. And we were concerned that maybe there'd be some clouds rolling in. So we decided that instead of trying to get even higher and climb a peak, we would actually try to get some nice swimming and relaxing in the sun. And so Texas Pass is 11,437 feet. So it would rival the majority of the passes you would complete on the John Muir Trail in terms of elevation, altitude, and scenery. That's for sure.
Mm-hmm. So we decided to start heading down the pass because we did want to get to that lake before everything rolled in. And I just feel like this descent was just absolutely stunning and worthwhile. And I think most people kind of go into the Cirque of the Towers from Big Sandy Lake, which would be our finishing spot. But I just feel like Texas Pass would almost be a worthwhile addition just to be able to go up it and then go back down looking at this view of the Cirque of the Towers. We made really good time downhill. The trail is, I think, a lot more well trod on that side of Texas Pass. It's less boulders and it's more of an actual trail. So we were able to just absolutely cruise down to the lake.
And it is more of just, it's not like this rocky trail or gravelly trail. It's kind of a dirt path. And you descend about 1,200 feet in 0.9 miles. So you definitely are there. There's a steepness to it, and you have to kind of watch your footing a little bit because you feel like you could almost slip a little bit on some of the dirt. But your eyes are so distracted by all of the amazing views around you that it really, if it would have gone on longer, I would have been okay because I was enjoying the scenery so much. But Carrie's right. Soon enough, we were at the bottom of that stretch, and we were very close to Lonesome Lake.
Which unfortunately fortunately, I was starting to get really hot as we headed to the bottom of Lonesome Lake. So we were getting very excited for our swim. And when we finally kind of reached the shore of Lonesome Lake, it was starting to get windy and we could literally see the clouds that were about to start heading in. We had thought that we were going to camp near Lonesome Lake, but you do have to camp a quarter of a mile away just because that is probably the most popular camping spot in that area of the winds, probably other than the Titcomb Basin. But Lonesome Lake can kind of be a nice jumping off point for a lot of other peak bagging that people like to do. And then there's some really good rock climbing in the area. So you kind of get a good mix of all kinds of people, backpackers, climbers. And so I guess apparently Lonesome Lake has had some water contamination issues from people not properly burying their waste far enough from the lake. So I can't remember if I found that out before we went swimming or after, but I kind of think it was after we went swimming because we got right to the edge of the lake and I think we just got right in, even though it was starting to get cold and it was starting to get windy. And so it's kind of funny because we got in the lake and I think everyone who saw us just thought we were totally crazy because at that point it was so windy that it did feel cold. But we wanted to get in the lake, and so we did, and it was actually very fun, refreshing little dip. But I think afterwards I was looking on Far Out because I was trying to decide if we wanted to camp there or not, and people were like, don't swim in the lake, it has the blue-green algae sometimes, don't drink from the lake. And I was like, well, I guess we'll find out if we're okay or not when we find out if we're okay or not.
But yeah, it was like not very much of a swimming experience. Usually, sometimes if it's nice enough, we'll swim and like tool around and just hang out in the water. And this was one of those situations where you were like jumping in and getting right out, jumping in, getting right out. But I felt so clean and like way less grimy after doing that. And then we basically, it was really beautiful. But once we kind of jumped in and did that thing, then we just sat on the edge of the lake and shivered. And you want to dry off, but you also are so cold. I think we had to add our soft shells or something to give us a little bit of protection from the breeze. And then it's one of those things where the sun is kind of like dancing in and out of the like really big, puffy, cute clouds. And so every time it goes away, you're so cold, and then it comes back and you feel a little bit better, and you're just kind of living for the moments that the sun is peeking out from the clouds.
And we could kind of see also that the permanent afternoon clouds were rolling in, so we figured we better finish eating our little lunch and then find out what we were going to do for the rest of the day.
Carrie and I were starting to really get into the spirit of time in the winds. And I think once you've been in the winds for a bit, you start to desire a little bit of a cross-country adventure. I'm thinking about the family that we met the day before with the alpacas and all the children and the fishing, and they were basically going to head up to a lake that was off trail. So we had watched them start up on the trail, and then at one point then they just took a right and started heading cross country, and we pulled up our map and we saw that they were heading to this lake that was kind of at the top of the hill that didn't have any trails leading to it. So when Carrie and I were heading down from Texas Pass, we were appreciating all the amazing views around us, but we spotted this one lake across the basin, kind of in this rocky area, and it just looked so beautiful. I think we could see the water sparkling with this beautiful blue color in the sun, and part of us were thinking we could stay at Lonesome Lake and camp over there, and then another part of us were thinking, wow, do we want to actually go to this other unnamed lake that we can see that there's a trail that heads a little bit up that way, but there's not actually a trail all the way to it. Would we actually like to camp up there?
So while we were sitting at the lake, kind of drying out and reading about how maybe the lake was actually really gross, we kind of just decided, you know what, we're probably not going to want to take any water from the lake. It might be a bit of a pain in the butt to find a campsite because even though it's not as busy at all, I would say, and doesn't even rival the busyness of some popular lakes in Washington or the Cascades, it still was a lot busier than most of the winds had been. So it kind of seemed like we might, how are we going to find a good spot to camp? And then we kind of just started talking like maybe we just want to go cross country and check out this other lake way up high. And of course, it was a day where we actually had plenty of time to just kind of hang out and check things out because we only were going 5 or so miles for the day. So we decided that we were just going to go and do a little cross country up to it. So we finished our lunch, put everything back in our packs, and decided we were going to have our own little adventure. We started by crossing a little creek, and then of course there actually was a little bit of a user-made trail for part of the way, so it's kind of nice. We were able to follow that and find a nice kind of waterfall where we could actually collect some water and feel like it was going to be clean because it was just moving so fast and not coming from the lake since we were going above the lake. And then we kind of just were able to head across till we got to this basin, and we saw kind of a spot where, we could head up some boulders and just go up and over to the lake. And when we finally popped up there, it was just so satisfying.
And on the way up to the lake, one of the little spots where we took a pit stop was this waterfall that was cascading over these flat rocks, this kind of little cliff, and behind it was Pingora Peak. And it was one of those moments where you have to just do a 360 spin and kind of look every direction around yourself because it's so beautiful. It's overwhelming. It almost makes a person feel emotional to see something that incredible. And so, yeah, I think in the moment, Carrie said it was like one of the most beautiful things she'd seen in her entire life. And it was so true.
I still honestly kind of feel that way. I feel like it's like a computer screensaver background or something almost. I mean, it was unbelievable with that teeny little waterfall, and then there was like some red rocks and colorful rocks, but then also just the granite towers and Pingora Peak in the background and so much greenery and just absolutely no one else, which I know we were not the first people to go to that lake, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but it just felt like we were the only people in the world that had ever been there or seen that. And it was just such a stunning, unbelievable view that I can't believe that everyone doesn't go there.
Yeah, and so as Carrie said, right, we did a little rock hopping and kind of scrambling over boulders. And then when we finally were able to see the lake, it was not disappointing at all. It was just that beautiful, sparkling, bright blue color and shimmering in the inevitable breeze.
And I did write in my journal, I wrote, feeling really good about the concept of cross-country travel here. And I think it was just in part because we were able to look at something from the past and just kind of say, okay, we know the general area, the general direction. And as long as we are going up and finding kind of those spaces that look like you can contour up nicely, we should be able to get up there. And we were able to get up there. So when we finally made it to the lake, we actually did see another group of people who we found out later had been climbing like Pingora Peak and some of the other really popular climbing routes in that area, but they were taking a swim. And we just decided we kind of wanted to sit and hang out by the lake. We wanted to enjoy, the sun while it was on the lake because it was probably going to dip below the peaks pretty soon. And so we did that for a long time, and then we kind of looked and found probably the only site where you could actually set up a tent up there. It was interesting because there were a lot of kind of evergreen trees on one side where you could kind of barely scrape through them, kind of that classic car wash feeling, except luckily they weren't wet. And then
a classic.
The rest was just so many boulders, but we found this one spot that was far enough away from the lake where we could actually kind of squeeze a tent. And so we set up our tent, and then we decided we were going to go have dinner by the lake.
So we had to get back down to the lake, and it was interesting because when we had first popped up to the lake, we were like right at the waters. And then we climbed up, from the outlet to find a spot to pitch our tent, and then we had to re-find the lake because we had a lot more boulders to climb over. We didn't go to the same location we had gone the first time, so we made sure to bring all of our food and our jet boil and everything so we could actually make our meal by the lake.
And this time we learned our lesson from our time down by the other lake, and we put all of our stuff in a pack so that we could use our hands while we were kind of clambering. I think we even just chose to wear our shoes instead of our tevas because we knew we could just take our shoes and socks off by the lake.
We had grown so wise.
Yes, so many lessons learned.
So we made it to the lake, and we actually had, because we had cut a day off of our trip, we had 2 peak refuels left. So Carrie and I, we've made a lot of our own backpacking meals in the last year, and we can usually obviously portion the meals so that we get the number of calories that we want. But the peak refuel, we've shared them a lot in the past, and maybe one of your more calorically dense meals, you're getting 450 calories per person, which is less than ideal for sure. So it's funny because we boiled our water, we made 2 meals, and we each had our own peak refuel. And I put in my journal, and when I read this, I had to laugh, that we had one Peak refill per person, which allowed me to realize that I don't fantasize about Taco John's and Pizza Hut when I'm actually full. So it's pretty amazing, all of my life backpacking when I eat my meal and then I still am thinking about all the other things I could eat. It's probably because I didn't eat enough.
And what I think is really funny is we've like nixed other dinners in the past because their 2-person serving was only like 300 calories per person, which again, when you're actually like walking and backpacking, carrying a heavy load, getting a lot of elevation, it's not enough to just eat 300 calories at dinner unless you're supplementing. So I think it's funny because we were still sharing these ones even though it was only 400 calories, but it's because the Peak refuel dinners taste so good.
And we're not buying 2 of them because we're too cheap.
Yeah, we got to save that money somehow. Except I guess when you're on the 7th or 6th day and you know that you don't have any more backpacking to do, you still can eat both of them, even though the savings aspect still would have been there technically. Because we could have just not eaten it.
And so the sun actually ducked behind the mountains at about 5:45 p.m. And so when the sun was like just shining on us, it was pretty comfortable with the wind. But as soon as the sun went away, a person felt like they needed to put on more clothes.
Yeah, so we put on our puffies and our pants. And then we did the thing that I always love to do where I say we just enjoyed some time sitting on rocks, looking at rocks. You know, it was like we could look and kind of, I had my map out so we could try to figure out which peak was which. And then, you know, you can turn 180 degrees the other direction and look at which peak is which. And it was kind of fun because we were high enough up that we could see some of the little climber trails to where they would start the climbs. And we were able to also, there were these little pikas that were running around, and I've never sat and watched a pika when they actually do their little scream. They're like, meep. But they are so cute when they do that. Their mouth just gets so massive. And so then we probably spent like 15 minutes trying to capture a video of it doing its little squeak so that we could, just post that for anyone who wanted to see it because it was such a neat thing. So it was honestly a really fun and relaxing time. Who knew that if you have a low mileage day and get to camp early, you can have a relaxing time.
And it's funny, like we were doing our pika watching and just loving to see those little creatures scamper around, which are they a member of the rabbit family, Carrie?
Yeah, we found that out afterwards. I always think they look like they're like a little disgusting kind of relative of a mouse, but later I read about them and they are actually a relative of a rabbit. So.
And I think marmots are also from the same family, and so marmots are technically the biggest in the rabbit family, I believe.
Well, I think it was interesting because when I was Googling them, like if you ever read the Bible and they talk about the mountain coney or something like that, rock coney, that's actually the same thing as a pika. And I was like, wow, that's just, it was just interesting to learn that, I don't know, it was a member of the rabbit family and all that kind of stuff like that.
And I think they talk about how they're so tiny, but they live in these harsh conditions. And you think about how many months of the year they're under snow and how they have to gather so much food in a limited amount of time. They're very resilient creatures, and they have the biggest ears, and they're so cute, and they go, meep.
And let me tell you, that little guy was out gathering. It had some full cheeks. It was taking its food to some little hole. And it was just very much not suspicious of us at all. So it was kind of fun because we could watch it for so long.
And so in addition to the pika watching, we also did some people watching, because then you could see we were really at a pretty high vantage point. We had quite a perch. We could see all the other spots people had pitched their tents below us. And then whatever they were doing, like some people were having a little campfire and just tooling around. So we kind of got the mixture of everything for a very relaxing evening at camp.
I would say the most interesting part was after the sun went down, we actually saw a headlamp on Pingora Peak, and there was a climber who was trying to descend, which we did end up seeing 2 headlamps, didn't we? At first we thought there was only one, but after a while the partner must have come around the corner and they were having to descend it in the dark, which I personally thought would feel pretty stressful, but we watched them for quite a while because we were like, oh, hopefully they're not having any sort of a problem, but they definitely were seeming to descend okay.
Because we actually saw them close to the top as the sun was setting, and then they must have descended the majority of it in the dark, because I don't think that they were there the next day. Yeah, I don't think that you spend the night up there.
No. I would say they descended almost all of it in the dark, because we saw them so close to the top with their headlamps on descending. Yeah. But it was really interesting to watch and kind of see how that process was going for them.
So there's almost like a little bit of a Yosemite vibe, right? I'm thinking about when we did Half Dome the very first time, and as we were leaving and it was dark, we could see the climbers with their lights on El Capitan, and then here it's the similar granite walls, and definitely a draw for climbers.
Thank you so much for listening to yet another episode of the
Two Sisters on Adventures podcast.
Tune back in next week to hear about our last day in the winds. And as always, you can find us on Facebook or Instagram at Two Sisters on Adventures if you want to see any pictures or videos about what we talked about. Thanks so much for listening, guys. Bye.